What's up, guys? This is James from the Timur podcast, and I've got another video showcasing a certain faction for the mod Tsardoms 1448 Fall of Constantinople, made for the video game Medieval 2 Total War. So if you're not aware, this is one of my favorite games. I've been playing it since it came out about 300 years ago, and I've downloaded dozens of mods since then, and I've played a lot of good mods, I've played a lot of bad mods, but this mod is probably the best mod I've ever played. It's certainly my favorite, and as such, I just want to bring as much attention to it as I can, because I think the modders definitely deserve that. They've done just an incredible job. So, today I want to cover the Crown of Poland as the faction. I've had a few viewers request this, and I decided to give it a shot. This is one of the new factions, so this mod has a sister mod, if you will, made by a lot of the same team, and that mod takes place about 100 years prior or so to the 1448 start date we have here. And in that previous mod, Poland does not, they're not a playable faction. They do make appearances as kind of independent rebels at certain times, but they are not a playable faction. So this is one of the newer factions. I was very excited to see them when I first downloaded this mod, and they definitely are a fun faction. So let's just jump right into this. It is 1448, of course, and you start with 6 settlements. You can see up here at the north center of the map. It kind of blends in, but that's just part of the Polish colors. Religion, you are Roman Catholic. Allies, none, and at war with nobody. So kind of an interesting setup there. You can definitely play a few different ways, but we'll talk about your neighbors later. As far as historical background, I'm going to scroll through this in case you want to pause and look. But basically, the history of Poland in the medieval era is very complicated, and yeah, it's very complicated. I don't want to try to explain all of it, but essentially they have a very close relationship with the history of Lithuania. They were sister states in a way, or under the same leadership at certain times, and a lot of that was caused by their common enemy, the Teutonic Order, who was engaging up in the Baltics, which does not show on this map, but would be up here in Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, places like that. And although the Teutonic Order was invited by the Poles initially, Poland soon discovered that that was causing a lot of problems, and Poland and Lithuania often joined forces to fight against the Teutonic Crusaders. Similarly, of course, during the 1200s, you have the various Mongol invasions all through the steppe, through Russia, the Ukraine, Poland, Hungary, all the way to the gates of Vienna in some cases, and Poland was ravaged by the Mongol invasions for decades, if not a century or two. So that definitely hurt Poland's strength. And then there are all sorts of politics with your southern neighbors, the Hungarians, who also have a very complicated relationship with Poland. You, of course, have all the Holy Roman Empire German states. You have the, where are they? The Bohemians to your west, who are Hussites. So although you do share some cultural similarities, you have different religions, and your Catholic friends may not like it if you were to pursue peace with them. And then there's other things. You have the Crimean Khanate, which is rising from the ashes of the Golden Horde, so you have to worry about that. And then Moldova and the Kievan Rus also have a complicated relationship with Poland, because both of them have been client states to the Polish crown at certain times, but now they've somewhat broken away, because in 1444, at the Crusade of Varna, which I'll show on the map later, the Poles and their Hungarian and many other Crusader allies were destroyed by the Ottomans. It was one of the last attempts of a crusade to stop Islamic power from spreading into Europe, and it was crushed. which killed the Polish king and threw Poland into 3 years of somewhat of political chaos. So that was 1444 to 1447, and now it is 1448. We do have a new king, King Casimir IV, who is also the king of Lithuania, but Lithuania and Poland they don't get along too well. There was a lot of politics between Lithuanian nobles and Polish nobles, and both of them wanting to make sure that the others weren't treated better, etc. And there's just so much to it. I'll maybe get into it a little bit more, but all that to say is, historically, King Casimir IV was incredible, and he ruled for decades and did quite a bit to really establish Poland and Lithuania as a future powerhouse in Europe. But now, in 1448, this is really a dangerous and precarious position for Poland to be in. So, now that that's all away, I kind of went on a rabbit trail there, let's talk about the actual game. So, you start up here, you have 6 settlements. For the long term, you need to hold 40 regions, and as you can imagine, most of these are in Moldova, in the Ukraine, and scattered through previous Lithuanian holdings and whatnot. And for the short campaign, you only need to hold 25 regions, including a few of these other settlements, and you need to eliminate the Principality of Moldova, because that is rightfully a client state of the Polish crown, and they must be brought back underneath the heel. So, for the Polish strengths, you make use of very strong cavalry, definitely true. Access to eastern auxilias, definitely true. Weaknesses, lacks good quality native infantry, that is definitely true. And rebellious nobility, yes, that is true too. This is a difficult time for Poland, as I have definitely explained a little bit. So, with that, let's jump onto the campaign map and see how things are going. So, now that we are on the campaign map, we are greeted, of course, with more historical background. I'm not going to go through it. I've explained a little bit, and I'm definitely not an expert on it, but I'll scroll through in case you want to pause. But yes, basically, Casimir IV has been on the throne for 1 year in Poland, but he really needs to solidify himself as the ruler. But we'll talk more about him in just a minute. So, this is where you start, and your capital is this city right here, and I'm going to do the worst American pronunciation of this, and I will just call it Krakow. I know that's not how you say it, and I apologize to any Polish viewers, but that's how we say it here, unfortunately. And I know I'm butchering the pronunciations of pretty much everything in this game, and I do apologize for that, but that's unfortunately one of my faults. So, that is your capital right here, and it is one of the best cities in the game, without a doubt. If I would say above anything, hold on to Krakow above all else. This is a really important city, and one of the reasons for that is you can see that it is already making 4,400 florins a turn, which is kind of ridiculous. That is a huge amount. So let's get into this. Inside, you've got a general. But, of course, you do need to watch out because his loyalty is terrible. He's not too keen on King Casimir, and that loyalty definitely reflects that. But he's got some biography, which is neat, and he also has, he is the voivode of Krakow, which gives him some nice benefits. Of course, you can change that, but this is how it starts. So he is the governor. Inside, you've got some pretty decent units. You've got some good crossbows, you've got some militia spears, and then you've got some Polish knights, and one of your unique units, the Great Banner of Krakow. And as Poland, you are a cavalry-heavy nation, primarily medium and heavy cavalry, but you do have some nice light cavalry too, and that is your greatest strength. You are going to be crushing down anyone who dares come across you on the battlefield because of your heavy cavalry. But we'll talk more about them later. So you've got some nice heavy cavalry right from the beginning, and as you can see here, you can also recruit quite a few good units right away. So you've got some great crossbow units who also have the ability to lay down sharpened stakes, so you can get them right from the beginning of the game. They do take 2 turns to recruit, but that's really not too bad. You've got access to 2 early handgunner units. Again, they're not the best compared to other late-game gun units, but all guns are extremely powerful in this mod, so it's very nice to have access to 2 different units right from the beginning. Other than that, you've got your standard various militia units, which is kind of a nice mix of German and then more Eastern European style. So you've got the Berg crossbowmen and the Berg halberdiers, 2 pretty good units for militia standards. But then you've also got some more Eastern militia, which we'll talk about later. So I know some people think that Poland is not fleshed out too much in this mod, and there is an argument to be made for that because they do borrow a lot of units from, say, German rosters or whatnot, but that is kind of just how this mod works. There's a lot of shared units. I would say the vast majority of units are not unique to 1 or 2 factions. They're kind of shared. But I would also argue that Poland does have some really nice, unique flair to it, which we'll talk about later. So, like I said earlier, you also are a very cavalry-heavy nation. So, from your feudal barracks, you have access to several great cavalry units right from the beginning, which is nice. And then your unique unit, the Great Banner of Krakow, you can only train them here from your capital. And they take 5 turns to recruit and are only available every 12 turns. So they are rare. It's going to be quite a while until you can get more of them. But as you can see from the stats, and we'll talk about that again later, they're amazing. They are just excellent, excellent heavy cavalry. And there's 82 of them in the battalion or whatnot. So, a great unit. Definitely train them whenever you can. For the price, which is only 403, that is an absolute steal for heavy cavalry. Especially if we look at your Polish knights, which is, they're not as good stat-wise, and there's only 52 of them. They still cost nearly 200 more. So, definitely train these guys. Don't worry about the price. I mean, worry about it a little bit. You have to be financially responsible, but 400 for some heavy cavalry is a steal, an absolute steal. So that is pretty nice. As for the construction and status of this city, it is a great city. It can't expand anymore, so you can throw those taxes up. Don't even feel bad about it because it doesn't really matter. They're not growing. They're not going to grow to a next settlement size. You get some decent mines here. They're definitely not the best, but if you build the salt mines too, you can definitely be making a couple hundred from them. And as for unique buildings, Krakow has quite a bit. So let's go through that. First of all, we have the, I'm not going to try and say that. I've already offended all my Polish viewers, I'm sure. But the Royal Castle, which gives you some nice benefits for public order. And this is how you train your unique cavalry unit and your princesses as well. So that's pretty nice. It's got some great historical background because of course it does. This mod is amazing, but let's keep going. We have St. Florian's Gate, which gives you some extra wall defenses. What I think that means in the game, and it's been a while since I've fought on the Krakow battle map, but I think you just start with cannon towers, if I remember. Yeah, improved towers. Yep, so you basically start with cannon towers, which is really nice. Cannon towers are so powerful, and it allows you to defend against vastly superior armies, so that's a really nice thing to start with. And there aren't too many settlements that start with that, so just some extra defense benefits, which is nice. You also get St. Mary's Basilica, which gives you some happiness and health bonuses. Health bonuses are really nice in this mod. I don't know if it's just me and my luck, but it seems like disease is a little more prevalent in this mod than other Medieval 2 mods, but that could just be because I play this mod so much. I don't know. Either way, public health bonuses are really nice to have because diseases are so annoying, especially if they start wiping out your giant armies. Anyway, so that's all nice, good stuff. Some historical background here. I'm going to skip this one, and we're going to go to the university. This is one of the oldest universities in Europe, started in 1364. I'm not going to try and say that name. I should know. It's the family, one of the royal families, but I can't remember offhand. But gives you some nice happiness bonuses, increase in tradable goods, population growth bonuses, so just good stuff all around, and then some history as well. So quite a bit of history, that's really cool. So all of those are really nice and helpful, but one of the best unique buildings in this whole mod comes right here, the Krakow Cloth Hall. Wow, I can't even say English words now. So as you can see, this just gives some increase in tradable goods. It does hurt your public order, but honestly, you don't have to worry about that because your other buildings do make up for that. And it gives you an instant income bonus of plus 2,000, which is just insane. So even if you have a terrible governor or no governor, you're going to be making a ridiculous amount of money here. So Krakow is a very financially wealthy city. Once you build it up, once you get those gravel roads and some mines, you get a good governor in there, and you'll be making 7,000, 8,000, if not more, a turn. So that's great. And then plus, just as a recruitment option too, you've got some great units, and you can obviously build that up too. So a great city, protected at all costs. You do not want to lose it. So let's move on. Over here, you have a Hussite general, which is kind of cool. He is a bit old, but he's pretty loyal, which, again, a lot of your generals are not loyal, so that is nice. He's got... yeah, he's pretty well-rounded. He is a bit old, but nice to have. The general bodyguard for Poland we'll look at later, but they are extremely powerful, so it is nice that you start with a few generals that you can kind of throw into combat and not feel too bad if they die, just because you do want to use their bodyguard. It's so powerful. We'll talk about agents in a little bit, but let's just move from west to east. So over here you've got a fort, which gives you free upkeep for 1 unit. However, the modding team did release a patch which fixed a couple things, including the battle maps for small settlements or forts are no longer wooden forts. They're the stone forts that they were in the previous 1344 mod, which is great. It's an improvement in every way, and it also gives you 2 units of free upkeep, I believe. I have not downloaded it yet because it is not save file compatible, and I have a few saves I didn't want to get rid of yet, but I will be soon because that's just a great improvement, I think. Down here, we've got another general. Definitely has some potential. Younger, he's administratively minded, which could be good. Possibly a good contender for Krakow governor. And some biography too, although not much, but that is okay. Over here we get our second city, Pilsno, or something like that. And this is a much smaller settlement, but definitely able to earn some money. Do they have mines here? I can't remember. I don't remember, but yeah, obviously you can build it up. And you start with just some Berg-style kind of German militia. Berg crossbowmen are okay, but Berg halberdiers are actually pretty decent, especially in the early game, so that's nice to have. Inside, you've got another decent general. I do like that he has a little bit of chivalry and that he's administratively minded. That could definitely help, but again, no loyalty. So if you move him out in the field, be ready, he may rebel against you. Only 3,500 people, can only make some militia units, but a city is a city, or a town is a town, I should say. So moving on, there's a lot to cover. We have another individual here. This is a great general, I would say. Some nice biography there. And he's very loyal. Very good commander, and he has some dread, which is really nice in the field. But perhaps best of all is he has one of the best retinues in this mod, and that is the Drill Master. So the Drill Master gives you some discount on the 10% training costs, which is nice, but what you want to use them for is the plus 25% movement points, which is huge. And it also stacks with other retinues that increase movement points. So what that means is I can move this guy anywhere in the green, which is crazy, provided that he doesn't get blocked by something. But if we look at someone similarly, the difference is just insane. And it might be a little bugged the way it works, but it could also be... Okay, but either way, very powerful. Make sure before this guy dies that you pass the retinue on to other generals. And some people don't know how to do that, so I'm just going to show you now. To pass retinue, and you can't pass all retinue, but you can pass some. I'm just going to show it right now, because why not? Pick another general. Has to be a named character. And all you have to do is combine them. Could be out in the field, could be a city. And then you simply drag it over. You get a little notification of retinue expands, and that is how that is done. So typically, if you have a really good general who has all sorts of great retinue, but he's about to die, maybe he's in his 60s or whatnot, I would pass on his retinue to other younger characters, just so you don't lose those. And then also with this mod is each individual settlement gives you a unique retinue. So if we look here at Pilsno, there is a individual retinue. Oh my gosh, my cats are begging me for food. Anyway, so it gives you little bonuses and history on that certain settlement, and that too you can pass. So if I wanted this guy here to be the governor, I could just pass that along. You'll get the same notification, and he is now the voivode of this town. He's actually not, because this guy's a better administrator, so it still kept him as the administrator. But if I were to move him out, it would change. So there's a lot of micromanaging with governors with this mod, and I absolutely love that. It's just a great element to this mod. But enough of that, let's keep this train rolling. So we got a fort over here, which is nice. It's on the main road, kind of protecting you from this break in the Carpathian Mountains, which is nice. Up here we have yet another general. His loyalty is definitely struggling, but he's somewhat young, and he has that great royal bodyguard, so valuable nonetheless. Moving a little further east, we have another general, a little more loyal, but could still definitely rebel against us, and that's one of the weaknesses for Poland in the beginning of the game, is it's gonna take a while for you to build up your more loyal servants and whatnot. Not servants, nobles, that's the word I was looking for. Down here you got another fort, which is nice right in the roads. Moving east, we have where most of our cities are. So we have a small city here. We've got 1,200 or 12,000 people, so definitely a little more developed. We're making a little bit more money. We've got a nice general in here. He is loyal, and he's got some command. He's also militarily minded, so you might want to pull him out of the city and put him in the field, because those are some pretty good stats. Inside, we've got just some basic militia. We've got some mounted sergeants, which is a great light, medium cavalry. A lot of factions have these guys, but you obviously do as Poland, and they're pretty decent, and for the price, they're not bad at all, so I do like them. And then you have access to some of your slightly better militia units, including some Lithuanian archers, which we'll talk about. So part of the flair with Poland is you get access to a lot of Eastern units, which is Rus and Lithuanian units, which is quite nice. And a lot of factions do if you are in this region of the map, but Poland, it's probably the easiest to train them as Poland, since your leader is also the leader of much of Lithuania. So that's pretty nice. We'll talk more about that later, though. Down here, we've got another general, pretty good general, but again, that loyalty is definitely missing. So not great there. We'll have to put him somewhere safe. And I apologize for the sounds in the background. The cat is in the litter kicking it around, and I'm just going to ignore him. So over here, we get another great settlement. Starts off as a fortress. It's got a decent amount of people. It probably won't reach Citadel in your playthrough unless you really micromanage, but that's okay. You've got access to a lot of great units, and right off the bat, including some crossbows, some more Lithuanians, Berg Halberdiers as always, and then some missile Lithuanian units, which are not bad. Well, we'll talk about them later. You also have access to some mounted missile units, including mounted crossbowmen, and then this mounted archer unit. So, pretty good. Definitely would build this up to get you your better units, but this will be, especially if you're expanding in the east, this will be one of your main recruitment options. Inside, we've got an okay leader. He is struggling with the loyalty again, of course. And inside, we've got some Ruthenian spearmen, which they're fine early spearmen. Some Lithuanian crossbowmen, which are also fine. But we do have some dismounted Rus boyars, which are a pretty good heavy infantry unit. And with Poland, you definitely do struggle with the infantry a little bit, so these guys are a very welcomed, heavier infantry unit to have. Moving eastward, we have a small fort here, which is nice, and then down here, we have two more settlements right here, Chokim or Hokim, something like that. 2,000 people, so pretty small, but it actually grows reasonably fast, I've found, especially if you change it to a town, which is what I usually do, because I've got a few castles in the area already. But some basic militia units, of course, and then a general in here who's not that great and not that loyal, but that's pretty much the name of the game for Poland at the beginning of the game. And then up here, we have a castle, so we can get a few more better units. Definitely can build this up. It's growing somewhat nicely. And we have a general here who is both loyal and definitely suitable to expand his traits and whatnot. To the east, we have a few forts on our frontiers. There's nobody in there, but maybe we could send some cavalry there or something just to keep an eye on the Kievan Rus and whatnot. But that's about it, except up here we have our faction leader, King Casimir IV, and he has a very nice army. So Poland is one of the few factions that starts off with an army that is ready to expand. Now, the obvious target is right up here, this Lithuanian city that needs to be brought back into the fold, but if we move our king up here, it is a very nice garrison, and they've got some great cavalry, and they've got a decent general for sure, some very nice heavy cavalry, some good infantry, fine missile units, and some handgunners. So you probably can take this, but I would siege it out for a little while, make their numbers go down. You do have a pretty good army, though. You've got some Hussites. They are expensive, but they're very good halberdiers. You've got some Pavis spearmen, some Lithuanian units, and some heavy crossbows, which is nice, and some good heavy cavalry. And if we look at our king, he is young, he is talented, and he is ready to take on the world. So there's some biography. He's got a great list of traits and retinue, including being the Grand Duke of Lithuania, which gives him all sorts of nice benefits. He is the King of Poland, which gives him a whole bunch of nice benefits, and he is the Grand... Oh, I can't remember how to say that. I looked it up and he's the Grand Leader of the Rus as well, which gives him additional benefits. So he's a very good leader. Don't let him die. He's very talented. And speaking of retinues and titles and whatnot, if we look at the Poland and Lithuanian titles, you can see that there are all sorts of things. Some of these we already start with, but we do have a claim to the throne in Bohemia. The Bohemians invited a Polish king to help rule, I think a few decades prior, but obviously our histories are intertwined in a lot of ways. Voivode of Moldova, of course, because Moldova is one of our client states that needs to be brought back in. And King of Hungary, that takes a lot to earn, but definitely pretty cool, just that you have the chance to earn that as well. So that is pretty nice. All right, let's talk about your finances, you start with 9,000, and if we look, you're actually making a decent amount. And part of that is you have the King's Purse income of 5,000. Now, I'm going to get a little ahead of myself, but obviously, with the border of the map being here, we don't have control of all the historically controlled Polish territories. And the way the mod kind of deals with that is you'll get all sorts of historical notes throughout your campaign about what's going on elsewhere, and a lot of that has to do with the Teutonic Order and the history with them and whatnot. So what that means for you is there are other Polish wars going on right now. They're not shown in this mod, but they are happening, and it will reduce your King's Purse. So you'll be making a little bit less later on in the game. And I think that's just a great way to kind of portray that, yes, it is the end of the world for us in the game, but historically there are obviously other things going on. So that's pretty neat. But financially, it is a bit of a struggle with Poland. You do have to build up, and you do have a lot of really expensive units with that heavy cavalry and whatnot, but just build up your mines, build up your roads. Those are really important. Get good governors and build up Krakow, and you'll be making a good amount of money. So it's not the hardest game financially. It's not the easiest either. I would say it's pretty mid-tier. But you start with 9,000, which is a pretty good chunk at the beginning of the game, and you can definitely build up your infrastructure pretty well there. So, okay, we talked about... Oh, we'll talk about agents. You start with a lot of agents, including a lot of priests. A lot of good priests, too, which is nice. So, this guy right here is very, very religious. He's also got a biography, which is neat. I think most of these guys do. So, this is nice because, obviously, being right between the Bohemian Hussite heretics and then bordering a lot of Orthodox lands as well. And then, of course, with the Mongols came a lot of Islamic influences in the Ukraine. So there's a lot of lands. If we just look right here, it's only half Catholic, and that's going to be hurting your public order quite a bit. Over here, you're only 40% Catholic. So these are your lands, and most of your people don't even believe what your faith is. So this is only 20% Catholic, and as you can see, that's causing a lot of religious unrest. So move those priests eastward, I would say. It's very nice that you start with a lot of them. But keep an eye on the Hussites too, because they are obviously trying to win people to their faith. So we've got a few priests just scattered around, and they all have biographies, which is just crazy. I'm not going to go through all of them, but that's really neat that the mod does that. You've got a halfway decent diplomat. He also has a biography. This is a real guy. That's awesome. And then you have a spy kind of over here as well to maybe send down, keep an eye on Hungary, or go over to Moldova. So that's nice. As far as diplomacy, you are not at war with anybody, and you have no allies. So definitely replayability with this campaign, and I've played it twice, and I've done different things both times, and that was quite a bit of fun. But you do have to expand eastward. That is kind of what they're forcing you to do a little bit, which is historical. I mean, these are Polish-Lithuanian lands that need to be brought back into the fold. The Kievan Rus and the Moldovans need to be taught that they need to accept the Polish crown. So yeah, you will be fighting in the east either early on or late game. Kind of depends on what you want to do. So with that, as you can kind of understand, your diplomacy, everybody's pretty fine with you. I went through and everybody is reasonable with relations, so that's nice. The only people who hate you are the Kievan Rus and the Moldovans, because obviously they do not want to submit. So that's pretty much it for diplomacy. You can do quite a bit. A lot of times this Austrian princess right here will just immediately come over to you and start relations, so maybe an alliance with them could be earned. But let's take a look at your neighbors, because you do have a lot. So immediately to the west we have the Hussites, and oh, I didn't talk about this, but there are a couple forts in between you and them, and that's actually kind of nice. It's a little bit of a buffer, so if the Hussites do want to move east and attack your city, which I have seen many times, the Hussites are kind of a a slow-moving faction. It takes them a little while to rev up, but if they gain maybe 1 or 2 more provinces, they can actually become a really formidable force. So watch out for that. Maybe an alliance is necessary, maybe not. You can call a crusade on the Hussite lands too. You don't start on great terms with the Pope, but if that's fixed, you could call a crusade on Prague, which could help weaken them. But yeah, they won't bother you for a while. That's usually the case. There is a fort here with some nice units. You could probably starve them out pretty easily, but that should probably be brought back under Polish control. It is in our land, technically, but that is that for them. Down to the southwest, they're not your immediate neighbors, but the Austrians are a very powerful faction, and they typically do fairly well, I would say. And they often do expand northwards, which does bring them closer. They won't bother you for a while, that's definitely true, but if you lose this buffer zone between them and you're not on good relations, I would not be surprised if they attacked you. But historically, I believe the Austrians and the Poles were allied at this time, and I think that's why this princess is up here, to kind of signify that that's about to happen. And when I play as the Austrians, I typically do ally with the Poles to kind of counter the Hungarian power. But, so the Austrians could be a natural ally. Otherwise, they probably won't bother you for a while. To the south are the Hungarians, and the Hungarians are one of the biggest superpowers in this game. They start with the 3rd largest amount of territory. They have some great units, some great armies, and they do tend to do pretty well, I would say. And so they are definitely a faction you want to look out for. In both of my campaigns, I pursued alliances with the Hungarians, which they did accept, which was nice. But in both of those campaigns, the alliance eventually broke down into war. Now, that did take a long time. So if you want to just buy time with Hungarians, don't worry about them. Focus on the east, maybe. An alliance could be a good move, but just keep in mind that the Hungarians want to expand, and they will gladly betray you if that helps them do that. So be mindful of the Hungarians with any faction, but definitely with the Poles, I would say. They're one of your rivals in this campaign. Then the Principality of Scilly is also here. They typically don't expand much. They kind of just hunker down in pest, but if you go to war with the Hungarians, they're obviously a great ally to have. Otherwise, I wouldn't pay them too much attention, but it just really depends on who you want to make as your allies and who you want to make as your enemies. Moving on, we have the Kievan Rus way over here. You do have some buffers between them, and the Rus typically don't expand too aggressively. I would say only in 10% or 15% of games they become a powerful faction. Typically they just kind of hunker down in these 2 settlements. That's just how the AI works sometimes. But they will attack you if you expand next to them. They have a history with you. They would, well, yeah, they have no problem with attacking the Poles. So be mindful of them. You could ally with them, but usually they beat you to it, and they will ally with the Moldovans, who we'll talk about in a second. Down here, we have the Crimean Khanate, and like the Kievan Rus, they take a long time to get going, but they become superpowers much more commonly. I would say it takes a while usually, but if they're able to kick the Genoese out of the Crimean Peninsula, they can become quite strong. And if they move over here, I have seen the Crimean Khanate basically take a lot of the former Golden Horde lands and subjugate the Ukrainian people and whatnot. So keep an eye on them. They could be a nice ally to have if you're fighting the Moldovans and the Kievan Rus. You have a common enemy, kind of the enemy of my enemy is my friend sort of deal with them. So that could be nice, but other than that, it'll be a while before you bump heads with them. Down here, the Vlachians are sort of your, actually they're not really your neighbor, but you'll probably deal with them eventually. And Kind of depends on how you go. If you want to attack Moldova, Wallachians could be a nice alliance. If you're at war with the Hungarians, I would definitely pursue an alliance with the Wallachians because they are often natural enemies. But if you are starting to fight the Ottomans, then try to get the Wallachians to join you because the more allies you have against the Ottomans, the easier it's going to be for you. And similarly with the Ottomans, they don't start anywhere near you, but you'll definitely bump heads with them in the late game, especially if you expand to the east and to the south. And with the Ottomans, it's the same strategy as always. Get as many guys, form those alliances with as many factions as possible, call crusades on their lands, and that's the best way to beat the Ottomans, is just keep them busy with as many other factions as possible. But I'll talk more about that probably when I do cover the Ottomans, which is going to be a little later, but hopefully I'll get to them soon. That'll be a long video. I'll probably break that down into 2 videos. And then last but not least, we have the Principality of Moldova. So they are your direct neighbors here to the south, and basically they are your first natural enemies. Now you could change that, but typically that doesn't happen. The AI almost, I would say 95% of the time, Poland and Moldova are 2 of the first factions to break out fighting, and typically they don't stop. Their wars go on for years and years and years, and they're often evenly matched. I would say Poland comes out on top usually, but I have seen Moldova push the Poles all the way back too. So they will attack you if you don't attack them first and don't pursue an alliance with them. That's just basically how the mod is made, what happened historically, I believe. So war with Moldova is probably the first thing that's going to happen. And if you've looked at my Moldovan overview, they start off with some fantastic units. They're very powerful, and although they don't have the best economy, their units are pretty cheap, so they can usually pump out a lot of them. And like I said earlier, if you go to war with Moldova, chances are Moldova will ally with the Kievan Rus, and you'll have to worry about 2 Orthodox powers trying to push you out of the Great Steppe. So watch out for that. With war against Moldova, the nice thing is their 2 best settlements are the closest ones to you. So Sukieva is their best financial city, and if you're able to take that, their finances will be in shambles. And then Targun Yemt is one of their best recruitment centers, so if you can kind of blitzkrieg through and take these 2 settlements, it will make your job a whole lot easier. But again, they do start off pretty powerful, so just be careful with that. And then, actually, they do have another great city over here, which is hard to take because they usually have just a ton of great units here. So, war with Moldova, it isn't the hardest war in this mod, especially all things considered, but early on it can definitely be a challenge, especially since you might be a little more interested in defeating some of these rebel settlements first, whereas Moldova's main priority is expanding into Polish lands. That's probably their best option, and the AI usually does that. The other nice thing I'll mention is that there are a couple forts here on this river crossing, so if you take those, it'll give you a little more time to defend against the Moldovans, but other than that, that's all I'll say with them. Try and take them on early. I would say maybe build up some cannons. Cannons are great in this mod, very, very important, and then rely on your heavy cavalry because you do have better heavy cavalry than them, and you can't really match their infantry, especially in the early game. So use that cav. As far as rebel settlements to expand into, directly to your south, we have Kassa here. This is a good city. It has some mines, it's got some trade opportunities, but it is also very heavily defended. So in Kassa itself, there are only a few units. We could probably see what they are. Yeah, just some Hussite units, but those are usually pretty hard nuts to crack. And then worse is there's a full Hussite army here too, which has some great units. Now, usually what this guy does is he goes over and just hides out in this fort, but he might come out and attack you if you're laying siege to Kassa, so be mindful of that. And then I would say the biggest danger of taking Kassa is it gets rid of this nice buffer zone between you and the Hungarians. And in both my Polish campaigns, that is how war with the Hungarians started, is I took Kassa, I did not defend it too well, and the Hungarians used that as an excuse to expand northwards, so just be mindful of that. To the southwest, we have Brno or something like that. Again, I wouldn't expand here right away because it's not your immediate neighbor, and the Austrians and Bohemians are going to be trying to take this, sometimes even the Hungarians, so I would just let them fight that. It's also got some really nice units there, which are hard to defeat, so be careful with that. To the east, we have a few more options. We already talked about this Lithuanian city right here. Again, it's a very nice army, so I would recommend, if you want to take this right away, lay siege to it for a few turns, which could be hard because Moldova might attack you right away, within 3 or 4 turns even. So your other option is just leave it for now and send your king southward to just do a really early initial push south, but again, it's up to you. And then all the way over here, there's another wooden castle. It's not the best settlement, it's very well defended, and the Kievan Rus and Moldovans oftentimes will expand here, so if you were to take it, you'd probably have to defend it right away, so I wouldn't recommend that. I think your best course of option is attack Moldova, and either push them back far enough so that they're not really a threat, or eliminate them, or force them to become your protectorate. That's probably your best bet. That'll really help your economy as well, and then you can kind of decide what your next course of action is. So, alright, gotta catch my breath. Let me look at diplomacy, I talk about that, expansion. Yeah, I think that about covers it. I feel like I'm forgetting something big, but... Oh, okay, scripts and events. There are a few for Poland that I've come across. Again, I have not played through the end of the game as Poland. There's, what, 400 turns? Yeah, 328 turns. That's a long time. I've never made it to the end of the turn list, so there could be some scripts hidden way back in there that I don't know about. I haven't gone through all of the files. I know a little bit how Medieval 2 files work, but I'm definitely not on modding level, so I don't even understand all the scripts. But from what I remember, your King's Purse is reduced at some point with your other Polish wars, which I talked about, and then there are a few times that rebel armies will spawn in your lands, including a pretty hefty Mongolian army in your eastern lands, so just be ready for that. And that signifies the Golden Horde, which is kind of over here historically, and they were trying to recover a lot of lost lands, but they're also going through civil wars and whatnot. So anyway, shoot, I was just gonna say something else too, and I can't remember. Oh, another script that you get with most factions is you have the option to hire certain mercenary armies at times, and they're usually pretty expensive. It'll give you maybe 5 or 6 units for 8,000 to 10,000 florins, so very expensive. And if you decline the offer, then they become just a pillaging rebel army, and they can be a real pain to deal with. But if you accept their mercenary offer, you do get a few nice units usually. And as Poland, you get some Hussite units oftentimes, or some Vlach or Kievan or even Mongolian, I believe, units. So that's nice. You do have some good mercenaries that come into play. And that's pretty much all I want to cover, I think. I still feel like I'm covering something big, but I'm sure we can discuss it in the comments as well. So with that all said, we're like 42 minutes right now. Let's look at the Polish roster. Okay, so with Poland, their roster is actually pretty interesting, and we've talked about this a little bit, but you've got this music is so intense. You've got a kind of a combination of German style, some Russian style, or Rus style I should say, some Lithuanian units, and then you'd also have access to Hungarian and Moldovan units if you're expanding into their lands. So I've kind of compiled sort of a weird list. I want to first cover some of your more German-style Berg units, which you have access to in a lot of your heartlands of Western Poland. Then we'll go through the Rus and Lithuanian units, because you'll probably be using them quite a bit. And then we'll finish with kind of your mainstay Polish armies, which are recruitable anywhere. So first of all, let's talk about the more German style, and that is the Berg units. So these are area locked. You can only recruit them in kind of your western provinces at the beginning of the game, and then if you expand into Bohemian and German lands, you can obviously train more of them. But we've talked about these guys before. We'll talk about them again. Berg Spearmen, cheap, basic militia spear. They're useful for that, but other than that, they're not going to win any wars. There aren't going to be any songs sung about them, but their job is to be cheap and to be able to stand and fight for a little bit. They get that free upkeep, which is nice, but other than that, that's about it. Moving on, we have the much superior unit, I would say, and I know I've talked about these guys a lot, but the Berg Halberdiers, also a very cheap militia unit, but they also have a bit of extra punch because of these halberds that they have, with attack of 5, charge bonus of 4, has a bonus against cavalry, and it is effective against armor. So they're still militia. They will rout pretty easily, but because of that extra hit, you'll actually be able to get quite a few kills with them if you use them in the right situation. So if I had to choose between the Berg Spearmen and the Berg Halberdiers, I will pick the Halberdiers every single day of the week. Moving on, we've got some Berg Crossbowmen. They're just a very basic early militia crossbow unit. They're exactly what you expect. They're cheap. They're going to take a lot of hits because they don't have any armor or shields. They're terrible in the melee, but that missile attack of 8 is useful, especially for that price. So if you need a few more bolts in the air, not a bad option. But I don't want to spend too much time on these guys because obviously I've talked about them before and I will talk about them again. So moving on to more of the Rus and Lithuanian units, and I've got them kind of mixed together because a lot of their lands, area of recruitment, overlap. But you will be using these guys a lot in your campaign, typically. You have access in some of your eastern cities to recruit them right away, and if you expand eastwards, you'll obviously be able to keep doing that. So we start with Ruthenian peasants, and they're one of your just basic peasant units, but I actually would say they're one of the best peasant units available. Now, don't get any ideas, they're still terrible, all things considered, but for being peasants, they have a few tricks up their sleeve. So, obviously they're dirt cheap to recruit and to upkeep, but they're expert at hiding in woods, bonus fighting cavalry, effective against armor. All of that is pretty typical for peasants. They're usually using these farming tools implemented as weapons, but because they're polearms, they do get those bonuses. But they also have good stamina, which is pretty rare. I mean, these are men of the steppe, and that is not an easy place to live in the 15th or really any century, unfortunately. But an attack of 2 is a little higher than normal, I would say, and a charge bonus of 4 is definitely higher. So they can definitely get a few kills, and for being just dirt cheap peasants, not a bad option as far as peasants go. Total defense of 5 is maybe a little higher than normal, but that is all defense skills, so any type of missile unit will devastate these guys, but a neat peasant unit, all things considered. Moving on, we have the Ruthenian Spearmen. Basically just the Berg Spearmen, but the Rus version of that. Just a very early tier militia spear unit. They get all the normal bonuses you would have. Their defense and their attack is nothing spectacular. It's all pretty average, but their design is pretty cool. I do love these teardrop shields, so definitely enjoy that. And I want to say they're also really cheap. If I look up, yeah, their upkeep is 139, which is very cheap for spears. I mean, the Berg Spearmen are probably similarly priced, but for early spear units, not a terrible option. And you can upgrade their armor, as it shows here in this picture. They look really cool in that armor. But I would say the better option is the Lithuanian Spearmen, which are just better in every regard. They have a 3 attack instead of 2, same with the charge bonus, and their defense is much better as well, 14 instead of 12. But most importantly, they have good morale. So again, they're not great units, but for early spear units, they're better than their Ruthenian brothers in every regard, so I would choose these guys over them. I believe they both get free upkeep, but they are area of recruitment units, so just be mindful of that. And as far as upkeep for these guys, I want to say they're a little more expensive, 172, but still not terrible if you need spears, and really like the Lithuanian designs. In the mod Stainless Steel, which is probably the most popular mod for Medieval 2, Lithuania was one of my favorite factions, and they had a really similar design, so I love that this kind of harkens back to that mod in a way, and history more importantly. But yeah, just a great design. Great unit. I do like the Lithuanian units a lot, and it adds some nice flavor. We also have a early militia archer unit, which is one of the Rus units that you have access to, and they're just peasant archers, poor morale, 2 missile, 5 defense. They're terrible in every regard, but they're peasant archers. That's they're just hunters. That's essentially it. And now they are in warfare. You can't really expect them to perform too much better. They do have a shield, which gives them a little bit a benefit in missile fire. You can see that they have it on their back with these great Kevin Roos coat of arms and whatnot. But other than that, they're pretty poor for archers. Then I included a mercenary unit. It's kind of interesting. You can recruit these guys from turn 1. Most mercenary units you have to wait, and I don't know why that is. Maybe the modders had a reason for it, but it is nice. If you need a few more javelins, these guys are not a bad option. Actually, I think they're really your only javelin option, but any javelins are powerful. So although these are technically militia and peasants, they are very cheap, which is nice. Their total offensive 8 is not terrible for a militia unit, and a missile attack of 10 is really nice. Plus, they have good stamina on top of that, so they can run around a little bit. I want to say they're also really fast, and I want to give a shout out to one of my viewers. I can't remember his name. I should have looked that up. I'm so sorry. But he pointed something out to me, and that is in Medieval 2, footmen actually move at different speeds, which is awesome. And it's usually not implemented in mods too much, just because it's not a huge difference. It's just a tiny little thing, and modders have so much. I mean, Medieval 2 is held together with duct tape and pieces of plastic, so I don't blame people for not wanting to mod every little detail. But of course, with this mod, they've gone above and beyond in every way, and there are units that move slightly faster than other foot units, and I want to say a lot of the militia tier and skirmisher units are slightly faster. Now, cavalry obviously will still run them down easily, but that is just such a cool little bonus that I didn't really think about. I kind of forgot that that was an element of Medieval 2. So one of my viewers, I can't remember your name, but you know who you are. Thanks for pointing that out. I'll definitely keep that in mind in the future. So moving on, we've got some Lithuanian missile units, and I actually like both of these units a lot. I mean, they're not the best units in the game by far, but for what they are, in the early game, especially if you're trying to rush Moldova, they are very valuable. So first we get Lithuanian crossbowmen, and there's really nothing special about them. Quality is average, I would agree with that. Melee attack of 3 is pretty poor. Missile attack of 8, I mean, even Berg crossbowmen can match that. But 11 defense is actually pretty high, especially because of that 7 armor. And you can see that they've got some nice armor, so they can take a few hits. And they're pretty easy to train. You can get a few of them out on the field pretty quickly. And their upkeep is only 135, which is really, really cheap. So definitely don't feel bad about bringing some of these guys. Again, they're still militia grade, or local, I should say. So maybe they're professional soldiers, maybe not, but they're not going to stand and fight as long as more professional troops. So be mindful of that, but if you're trying to just get a lot of missile units out on the field as fast as possible, not a bad option. And similarly, the Lithuanian archers, I would also say, are very, just kind of in the same category. They have the same amount of armor, that's 7 armor, which is really nice. Melee attack of 3 is nothing special. Missile attack of 4 is average, or maybe even a little below average for archers, but they have long-range missiles, and they're cheap and easy to recruit. Their upkeep, I want to say, is 143, which is really low for archers with that long-range ability. So Yeah, they're not the best units. They're definitely not the best units, and in the mid to late game, you're probably not going to even want to hire them too much. But for the early game, if you want to rush Moldova or rush Hungary or even the Kievan Rus, these guys are great to just pump out onto your fields. And I was not expecting to like them, but they were pretty helpful in my campaign, so I definitely enjoyed that. As far as the best Lithuanian and Rus units, you do have a few options. We'll talk about cavalry later, but you do have access to the dismounted Rus boyars, and I like these guys a lot. And obviously they're area of recruitment, but as far as heavy infantry go, this is one of your best options. So yeah, Poland's biggest weakness, I would say, is infantry. That is definitely somewhere where they struggle. And having a nice heavy infantry unit like these guys is really appreciated. So they are effective against armor because they've got these maces and like war picks almost in a few of them. Actually, no. Oh yeah, they do have a few picks, which is cool. That's awesome. They have that good stamina, which is great. Excellent morale is awesome. And the attack of 3 is definitely low. They will struggle a little bit because of that, but it is effective against armor, which is nice, and they do have a decent charge on top of that. So you will get kills with them, but the best things about them is their total defense of 24 means they will definitely be able to be in the fight for a while, especially with that excellent morale and good stamina. And 100 men in a unit is great. A lot of more professional heavy infantry aren't always as high as that, and actually I take that all back because I'm looking at this and it has 200 and 150 men, so 100 is not that great. I take that, just ignore that. It's been a long day, but they are cheap. So with heavy infantry, especially dismounted boyars and other dismounted nobles, they're usually in the 400, 500, 600 upkeep range, but these guys, their upkeep is only 315, which is not bad at all for heavy infantry. So they look great. They'll definitely get a few kills, and they'll be able to take a lot of hits. They're feudal, so you get that free upkeep, and even if you don't get that free upkeep, they're only 315, so not a bad option to have. Just watch out for cavalry charges, obviously, because they have these small, they don't have pole arms, but to defend walls, to even take walls in some situations, or as backup infantry, not a bad option at all. I'll talk more about them when I cover the Kievan Rus, because they have access to them too, but a good unit. I like them a lot. And then we move on to kind of your main units as Poland, as, well, foot units, I should say. So far, these guys all have been area of recruitment locked, depending on where you can train them. But these units you can train anywhere on the map as long as your buildings are developed enough. So starting off with Pavis Spearmen, we've covered them before, and we'll cover them again, but they're just a great mainline unit. So attack of 4, charge bonus of 4, that's both pretty high for spearmen. They get that bonus fighting cavalry. Excellent morale means they're going to stand and fight for a while, and a total defense of 21 is excellent. So they don't have the best stamina, and they take 3 turns to recruit and a pretty high barracks, but once you have them, they're just a great unit to hold the line with, as your cavalry and archers do the killing. And as Poland, your cavalry is going to be the ones doing the killing. So if you want to hold the line, these guys are not a bad option. And they are definitely my main line with most of my Polish armies. Now, you do have access to a arguably better unit, the Armored Halberdiers, but they're a little harder to get a hold of than the Pavis Spearmen. So for every armored halberdier unit I probably have 3 or 4 Pavis Spearmen. That's just how my game's developed, but yours might be a little different. But with armored halberdiers, we've talked about them before, we'll talk about them again. Just a great unit all around. Effective against armor, bonus fighting cavalry, and they can form that spear wall, which is great. They are cavalry killing machines, and because cavalry is so powerful, that is very valuable. They have that excellent morale, still not great stamina, so you don't want to have them fighting for too long, but total defense of 26 is great, 17 of that being this plate armor, which is just great. 7 attack is awesome, and yes, just a great unit. You won't have access to recruit them right away in most cases, but once you do, definitely recruit them. They're not even that expensive on top of it, and by the late game, your finances are usually better anyway. So both of these units are great, and the best infantry you have available to you. And yes, I understand that they're similar to a lot of other factions. I mean, a lot of other factions share these two units, but that's kind of fine by me because I really love these units, and everything else is kind of supplemental, which will give you that nice different flavor for playing as Poland. And yeah, I don't really agree with the idea that Poland is a carbon copy of other factions. I get it, and I definitely sympathize with it, but I really enjoy my playthrough with Poland, but we'll get to that later. Then you also have a few missile units, which are nice. You get the Tsardoms or something like that, Arquebusier, and this is just an early gun unit. They're nothing too special. I believe the Kiev and Rus also have access to them. Good morale, which is actually kind of nice. You don't often have that with early gun units. Missile attack of 26 is great. I mean, any missile attack with gun units is devastating. Melee attack of 5 is actually halfway decent as well. Total defense of 9 definitely hurts. Only 4 armor. It is nice that they do have some armor, but they will definitely be killed pretty quickly in the melee or with missile fire. But that is not why you purchase gun units. You want that missile attack, and you have access to them right away, which is nice. So yeah, I definitely pump these guys out. They will do damage. But I would say the better unit is the Pavis Hook Gunners. Their missile attack isn't as good, but in a way it doesn't matter too much because it's still very high. 21 is still devastating, and 14 defense is really nice. So their armor isn't quite as good, but with this Pavis shield, that will protect them a lot against archers and crossbows. So that's nice, but don't feel bad about getting either of these guys. Any gun unit is powerful, so definitely not a bad option. And then with other missile units, you have Pavis crossbowmen. We've talked about them before, and we will again. Just a kind of your very standard basic archer crossbow unit, I should say. Missile attack of 10 is good, but it's not the best. Total defense of 15 is good, but it's not the best. Long range missiles is very nice. Good morale is good. Yeah, they're just a crossbow unit. I mean, they're Pavis crossbowmen, and you get what you pay for. They're not the best crossbows in the game, but they will definitely get kills. And they're fairly cheap on top of it, too, so you don't have to feel bad about that. I would suggest, though, getting the Polish heavy arbalesters whenever you can. This is very similar to the German unit. I think they have 1 less armor, but these guys are professional crossbows, and they're excellent. It says average, but I would argue that they're excellent. Missile attack of 13 is very high. Their defense is a little less, but their armor is higher. And you could argue all day about whether armor or shields is better. It really depends how you're using them and what you're going up against. But 11 armor is good regardless. 13 is still low. I mean, they're definitely not the best crossbows in the game. Poland, you're a cavalry nation, so having good crossbows at all is nice, but the other great thing about them is they can lay those sharpened stakes, and just because of that, I will pick them over the Pavis crossbowmen usually. I'll train both of them for sure, but the stakes are so powerful in this mod that I will not pass over these crossbows. So that's pretty much it for Poland. Again, nothing too spectacular so far. A lot of this has been area of recruitment. It takes a while for you to get your more mainline units. So you might be thinking, like, what's the draw to Poland? There's nothing that makes them stand out too much so far other than some, area of recruitment units. Well, Poland is a cavalry nation, and they have fantastic cavalry. So let's look at Poland's cavalry. Alright, so as you can see, Poland has access to quite a bit of heavy cavalry. Well, just cavalry in general. And a few of these are area of recruitment, which we'll talk about first, but then you also have a whole host of main tier cavalry. So, first of all, we have a Rus style unit, or possibly Lithuanian, but this is... oh, now I have to know. Okay, so it is Lithuanian. Okay, This is just an early tier archer missile unit, but they're actually pretty halfway decent. So if we look at their stats, good morale, good stamina, total defense of 12. All of that is pretty solid, especially with that 7 armor. That's pretty nice. Missile attack of 5 is pretty standard for horse archers. Nothing spectacular. But a melee attack of 7 and charge bonus of 6 is really nice, especially for horse archers. So they're kind of surprising. You can shoot a few missiles off, make the enemy kind of think that they're just kind of mid-tier horse archers, but then charge them in, and that 7 and 6 will actually serve pretty well. Plus they have good morale, so they won't flee as easily as other early tier horse archers might. They're not too expensive, a little under 200 I want to say, and unfortunately their area of recruitment, but a great unit. They're pretty easy to train, and I do like these guys a lot. Moving on, we have the Rus heavy cavalry that you have access to in the Rus lands, and they're just a great heavy cavalry unit. Attack of 6, charge bonus of 15, total defense of 22. It's not as high as more Western European or Ottoman heavy cavalry, so you will have to watch out for that. But other than that, they're pretty darn good. And the best thing about them is that for their secondary, they have a mace, so you get that armor piercing bonus, and it has an attack of 6, which is pretty darn good. So yes, they are elite. They will suffer in the late game against other heavy cavalry, but they look awesome, and that mace attack is pretty nice. Now, they are expensive. They have an upkeep of 500, which is pretty standard for any noble heavy cavalry, but they are feudal, so you get that free upkeep, and they're fairly easy to train once you've built up your feudal barracks and your culture enough, so that's nice, and it's just a good option to have if you need another unit of heavy cavalry. And Poland kind of reminds me of the Bosnian roster in a weird way. With Bosnia, if you remember my overview with them, they don't have the best infantry in the game, but they can train so much of it. Like, you get good swordsmen, you get all sorts of halberd units, and it lets you build up your armies really quickly. And Poland is kind of in a similar way with cavalry, is you have so many options that it's really easy to build up a whole host of cavalry. And with how powerful cavalry is in history and this game, that's pretty deadly. Also, great design. Just love to see it. And the last area of recruitment is you also have the Lithuanian heavy cavalry. These guys are absolute tanks. They have those Lithuanian shields, which I love to see. And they're just excellent. Excellent morale, powerful charge, total defense of 27, so they'll definitely be able to take on heavier units. Even in the later game, they'll definitely do well. Charge bonus of 17 means they will crush anything in their path. And as a secondary, they have a sword with an attack of 7, which is not the highest for noble cavalry, but it's still definitely very good. They're feudal units, so they get that free upkeep. And they are a little more expensive. They are 600 instead of 500. So both these units are definitely expensive, but they're good, and it's a nice way to just really quickly bolster up your heavy cavalry if you need to and can afford the price. So love those 3 units. There are better units in the mod, sure, but for what they are, definitely good. Now we get to the cavalry that's available for you to train, and just looking at this, we have 8 units, which is pretty crazy. First of all, we have mounted crossbowmen. We've seen them before, we'll see them again. Just a good missile unit. Total offense of 11 is good. Good morale. Missile attack of 8 is nice. Melee attack of 6, charge bonus of 6, all that is good. Pretty standard. Little pricey, 200 upkeep, which is actually not too bad. It takes 2 or 3 turns to recruit them, I think 3 turns. And you do have to build your ranges up a little bit, but a great unit. If you like mounted crossbows, these guys are good. I kind of stay away from them personally, just because that's my playstyle, but no shade to these guys. They're a good unit. Moving on, we have the Hussar Lancers. We've talked about Hussars before. There's a few different types of Hussars, but you do have access to these guys as Poland. And they're locked behind a scripted event, so you won't get them until, I want to say it's around turn 50 or 60, maybe a little bit later, maybe a little bit earlier, somewhere around there. So you don't have to wait too long. And they're well worth the wait. There we go. They're fantastic light cavalry, absolutely fantastic. So expert at hiding in woods, you can get those ambushes, frighten nearby enemy infantry. If you can flank the enemy, you will likely rout them, which is awesome. Excellent morale, powerful charge, and very good stamina. So just charge them in, pull out, charge in, pull out. That's just do the cycle charges with these guys, and you can rout several units with just 1 or 2 of these guys in your army. They're fantastic. Attack of 7 is great. Charge bonus of 15 is awesome. Total offensive 13 is low. Missile fire will devastate them, but they're light cavalry, so that is to be expected. And shield of 3 and armor of 3, they'll be able to take a few hits, but you will want to keep them out of enemy fire. But other than that, they're just a great unit. I'll probably talk about them again when we cover Hungary, because Hungary has access to them. But yes, if you want light cavalry, this is one of your best options. Then we get mounted sergeants. We've talked about them before. We'll talk about them again. This is just kind of one of those standard units, but they're good. Charge bonus of 15 is, I don't care what you say, that's awesome. Total offensive 15 is pretty standard, but respectable for an early tier medium light cavalry unit. Good morale, powerful charge. Yeah, they are average, that is true, but cavalry is by definition above average. So you will get kills with them. They're pretty easy to train. They're pretty cheap. I think their upkeep is 255 or something like that. So a good unit. I will always use these guys regardless of what campaign I'm playing. If I have access to trade mounted sergeants, I will. But then we get to your Polish units, and these guys are the cream of the crop. Some of the best cavalry in the mod, I would argue. And we start with the Polish Lancers, which is kind of like a medium tier cavalry unit, but I love these guys. I absolutely love these guys. This is probably the cavalry unit I use the most in my Polish campaigns, just because they excel at being medium cavalry. So excellent morale, powerful charge, that's awesome. Charge bonus of 17 is devastating. I mean, that's what the Lithuanian heavy cavalry had. To have that on medium cavalry is awesome. Total offensive 22, yes, it is lower. They will struggle against more heavier cavalry, but 22 is still really, really good. As a secondary, they have a sword with an attack of 6, so not the best, but that's okay. But the best thing about them is they're feudal, so they get that free upkeep. They're actually fairly easy to train. You can get a whole host of these guys fairly soon, and their upkeep is only 380, which again is pretty cheap for any type of heavy cavalry or medium cavalry. So yeah, you can have a few of these guys in each of your armies. You don't have to feel bad about it. They're not too pricey for what they are, and they look great. I love this unit. I use them quite a bit. And then we get the Polish Knights, the famous Polish Knights. Great heavy cavalry unit. There are better heavy cavalry units in the mod, sure, but these guys are, they're just fantastic. There's no way of getting around that. Excellent morale, may charge without orders, that's not really a problem. Powerful charge, yeah, a charge of 18 is definitely a powerful charge. Total offensive 30, yeah, it's a little lower than a handful of other units, sure, but 30 is still really high. They will do well even in the late game. For a secondary, they have a sword with an attack of 11, which is awesome, very good. So they will do well in the melee too. And their upkeep is 600, but that is pretty standard for your mounted nobles. And if you keep them in your settlements, get that free upkeep, you don't have to worry about it too much. Pull them out when you need them, and they will serve you well. Then we get the Great Banner of Krakow. We talked about these guys a little bit on the campaign map. This is your unique unit. You can only train them in the city of Krakow, but you do start with one of them, and anytime you can train these guys, train these guys. They are fantastic. They're, I would argue, one of the best heavy cavalry units in the game. They have 82 men in a unit, which is a ton. Powerful charge, excellent morale. They inspire nearby troops, which is awesome. Total offensive 32 is their tanks. Charge bonus of 18 is devastating. And their secondary, they have a mace with an attack of 6, which is armor piercing, so they can also chew up heavily armored units. And just because there's so many men, if you charge this into the enemy lines, you could take out 3 to 4 units just with a single charge. That's crazy. They're just a fantastic unit. Their upkeep, like I talked about earlier, is like 403 or something, which is so cheap for how many heavy cavalry you get. I mean, the Polish Knights, you get 30 less guys, and it's 200 more florins expensive. So there is no reason not to train these guys as often as you can. They're just fantastic, and they will pretty much decimate anything on the battlefield unless they get caught up in halberds and gunpowder. But other than that, even against some halberds, these guys can just annihilate. So a great unit. Definitely pick them up whenever you can. You also have access to the gendarmes. We've talked about them before. We'll talk about them again. They are a very late unit locked behind a script, but they're just fantastic. Charge bonus of 19, total defense of 34, frighten nearby enemy infantry. They're just fantastic, but we've talked about them a few times, so I'm not going to spend too much time on them. But yes, once you get gendarmes, definitely train them because they are fantastic. I mean, just look at their plate armor. They're obviously a great unit. And then last but not least, we have the Royal Guard, which is your bodyguard unit for your generals. And I would argue that Poland has one of the best bodyguard units. I believe they share this same bodyguard with Bohemia and then the French eventually. But they're fantastic. They're just knights in shining armor. Inspires nearby troops, excellent morale, powerful charge. That's all pretty standard. Charge attack of 14 is great. Total defense of 37 is so good. There aren't many other units that have a higher defense than that. So having that is just awesome. And if you're going up against the, say, the Principality of Moldova, they will not be able to counter this. You will beat every general of their army one-on-one every day of the week. So that's really powerful. And as their secondary, as a little bonus on top, it is armor piercing. It has a mace with an attack of 6. So even in the melee, your general bodyguard will likely come out on top. Just be careful, there's only 22 or so of them in a unit, so you do have to worry about getting overwhelmed and surrounded, but other than that, a great general bodyguard unit. So that is the strength of Poland, is having so many cavalry units at your disposal, being able to make cavalry armies very quickly because you have access to so many different types. That is what makes Poland so much fun to play as. Your infantry and your missiles do suffer, that is definitely true, but eventually once you get your halberds and your pavis spearmen, you'll be able to hold the line while your cavalry does the killing. So that is it for the Polish roster, and last but not least, let's look at my most recent Polish campaign. Alright, so here we are with my most recent Polish campaign, and I have pretty much finished it. I control 39 regions, I just need one more for the 40, and I have almost all of the required settlements. So I'll go through this as fairly quickly, but basically what I did initially is I attacked Moldova as quickly as I could. They were just a very natural target like we talked about, but they're also not Roman Catholic, so the papacy does not mind if you're attacking your fellow Christians, so that was nice. And basically I took these 4 settlements fairly quickly. There were definitely a few battles that I had to play out just to make sure I did not lose, but I was able to push them back. They lived down here on the Black Coast for a while, but I was able to... the Black Sea Coast, that's what I meant to say. They weren't strong enough to really put up a counter-attack. So once I pushed them back there, it was just a matter of time until I finished the job, and I made my way through Moldova all the way to the Black Sea. As far as allies, I was allies with the Hungarians for a while, for a long time, but like I mentioned before, they did eventually betray me, so I was forced to invade Hungary eventually. But After this, there were a few border skirmishes I had with the Ottomans throughout this campaign. I would say we never had a full-on war. There were just a few little fights, so they really kicked Walachia's butt in this campaign, which doesn't often happen, but I was forced to get involved on behalf of the Wallachians, who were my allies pretty much throughout the whole campaign. So you'll see here that I have crossed into Romania and whatnot, and the Wallachians only have Targa Viste left, and they're probably going to lose it fairly soon if I don't intervene. So the Ottomans and I have been at war a few times, but we haven't really been full-on enemies, and I want to say we have actually decent... we don't hate each other too much, but you can see that I just have a whole host of allies. The Principality of Scilly I allied with after Hungary attacked me. Bosnia has been my ally pretty much the whole game. Serbia was later on. A lot of these were added later on. I did ally with the Austrians right away, and they have remained loyal throughout the whole game, which is nice. And then the papacy is always a good ally to have, especially as Catholic factions, because it helps your standing with the Pope. I have a pretty good standing with him. I have throughout pretty much the whole game. That's the nice thing with fighting non-Catholic nations, is he doesn't really mind that. So I've kind of used the Danube as sort of a fortress against any further Ottoman excursions. I took a few forts from them just to, I don't know, just to kind of put a foothold on this peninsula for now, but I don't think I have to worry about them too much at the time being. I've got enough forces that I could hold the lines until I mount a counterattack, but up here I've got some heavy cavalry just in case, and I have moved into Carpathia. There we go. So I have the ability to make a lot of units if I need to create a counterattack. And just here, for an example, look, you can just train so many cavalry options in every settlement, which is, it's so great as Poland to have that option. It did take a while for the great step for the people to accept Polish rule. The religious differences definitely does hurt public order, so do watch out for that. And then there are a lot of rebel armies that are quite powerful in this region. So it is hard to bring stability to the steppe, but you kind of have to. That is part of the winning requirements. So anyway, after I defeated Moldova, I attacked the Crimean Khanate, and I took Oleski from them. And they actually offered to have a peace after that. And I said, instead of a peace, how about I make you my protectorate? And they accepted, because they only had one settlement left. So they've been my protectorate pretty much the entire game, other than our first war. And they've actually been pretty loyal after that. And I'm content with them living out here in the Crimean Peninsula. I have taken back most of the steppe from them, so that's fine. They can live out their days there. And then after this, I did move against Kiev. We had been at war for a while at this point. They were allies with the Moldovans, so they were not too happy that I eliminated them. So I moved eastward and I took out Kiev. It wasn't the hardest fight, just because they only had 2 settlements. So they did have a few armies sitting around, but after I took those out, it really wasn't too much of a problem. And as you can see, there's just a whole host of those Lithuanian and Rus troops that you can get here, which is great. It's if you use these Lithuanian units, you can really pump out a lot of halfway decent armies and kind of overwhelm your foes if you need to. And then I've got those Lithuanian and Rus heavy cavalry just as a backup. I've got some Mongol mercenaries. I've got some forts here, just in case some other rebels pop up and I have to deal with them. But other than that, this part of the map was pretty much secure, so that was quite nice. And then again, if you see that between these 2 castles, you can really pump out some elite troops once you build this up. So you've got those crossbows, you've got the Polish knights, you've got the halberds, and you've got the Pavis spearmen. So pretty nice to get that out. Oh, I forgot to mention that the Polish knights, you can upgrade their armor a little bit too. Just 30 isn't good enough for you, you can bump it up to 31, which is nice. So while I was kind of finishing up this war with Kiev, I was backstabbed by Hungary, and this was after I had taken Kassa. So I did have to attack Hungary, and thankfully, of all the Hungarian lands, their northern borders are usually the least secured, so I was able to push really hard and really fast against them, and I was coming down from the north as well as through Carpathia. So I probably took 6 or 7 settlements from them before their massive armies arrived, and they usually have a lot of big armies hanging out down here by Serbia and the Ottomans. So I did have to fight a few battles, but I did prevail, and I've pushed the Hungarians all the way back into the Balkans, essentially. And they were even excommunicated at some point, so I recently called a crusade against Posega, just as a little buffer zone, and the Venetians took it, so now I have a Venetian buffer state between the Hungarians and me. And then the settlements that I do have, I'm pretty confident that I could keep this if I needed to. The Ottomans are a little too close for comfort, and that is probably a pretty strong army, but I've got some great units down here, and a good general too, so I'm not too worried. And if I need reinforcements, I can definitely train them, so that's nice. Yeah, I moved into Budapest. Again, you have access to some great units. You can train the Hungarian units. I'll cover them when I cover Hungary. I didn't want to cover too many units, but that's pretty much it. It's somewhat of a straightforward campaign in that they do want you to expand east, but as for where else you want to expand, there are some options open to you, and it's just a fun campaign. I was not expecting to have as much fun with this campaign as I did, but I love cavalry, and this is a heavy cavalry. Yeah, oh man, I couldn't even finish that sentence, my brain just stopped. Oh well, I had a 10-hour work day, so that's what I get, but you are a heavily focused cavalry nation. Okay, there we go. It's not the best sentence, but it will suffice. So, I don't know. Let's look at the Fog of War just to see how the map went. That's not the code. There we go. Okay, so over here on the Crimean Peninsula, Genoa looks somewhat weak, but they have managed to stay on the peninsula. The Crimean Khanate hasn't pushed them off yet. Down here, the Kandarids are gone. The Ottomans took them out. The Karaman kingdom is still here, but who knows how long that'll last. The Byzantines, are the Byzantines still alive? They are, just on this island. Looks like the Hospitallers have expanded a little bit. Pretty standard. Albania is actually not doing bad. They've taken a few settlements. Look at all those armies. That's crazy. Yeah, so the Ottomans have definitely done well in this campaign, pushed well into Serbia. Ragusa has also done really well. That's interesting. They're in Serbia too, so that's neat. Hungarians are in Croatia and the Baltics a little bit, Bosnia, but they're definitely lacking. They're not doing too well. Serbia has one settlement left, so they'll probably die pretty soon. The Bosnians have been my ally, but they've been suffering all game. Oh, there's one of those big Hungarian armies that I'm worried about, but I think I'll be okay. The Austrians have been doing okay. Bavaria was taken out, which you don't see too often, and the Württembergians have actually been doing really well, which is kind of crazy. They're probably the faction that does the least in most campaigns, and they are doing fantastic. They've even pushed the Swiss back, which is crazy. The Swiss are so powerful in this game, but I might have to keep an eye on them, even though they are my allies. And then the Hussites, kind of oddly enough, I called a crusade against them just because they were growing a little too strong, and the Albanians took Prague, so a little bit of rewriting history for sure. I wonder what cultural ramifications that'll have, but that was kind of interesting. Looks like Milan is doing amazing, which would scare me if I wasn't so far away from them. But yeah, Milan is definitely powerful. The Papal States too have been expanding, which you don't see too often. That's pretty neat. But other than that, yeah, it's actually been a pretty different game. A lot of interesting choices and playouts that you don't normally see, but that's about it. Yeah, with Poland, give them a shot. If you like cavalry, definitely give them a shot. They're a lot of fun. And that's pretty much all I have to say. So my last settlement that I have to take is Opava right here. And I've been keeping an eye on it for a while. They definitely have a lot of units here ready, but I'm hoping I can just go right past them and attack. So I have two of my best armies here. You can see I've got a pretty good assortment, and I've got some great heavy cavalry. And then over here, I have just some great infantry and missile units. And this is actually, I wanted to showcase this guy, my prince. So I talked about that drill master retinue earlier. Well, I've put that also with this retinue, which increases movement points even further. And I think that's it. But basically what that means is I can move this guy so far. It doesn't even end here. I could move him all the way to where that green ends. So definitely keep an eye on those retinues that increase movement points, because they are insanely valuable. And also keep an eye out for any type of retinue that can heal battle surgery. You can see that on the bottom. These are usually, in this case, independent, so it's a historical figure who usually has a background in science or medicine or something like that, but that plus battle surgery is so powerful, and it helps you. Any casualties you take, more of them will be able to recover. So very powerful retinue. This mod, it does a great job of really making you pick what generals you want to use in the field and for governing. But right now I'm just rambling. My brain is fried. It's time to bring this video to a close. So let's see if I can take this. If not, I have a reinforcement army coming, but I'm fairly certain that I'll be able to win this. And I won it. So that is the end of my Polish campaign, I believe. That should be the end. There we go. Victory for Poland. Turn 114, the year 1476. So who knows, maybe in 30 years Poland will be powerful enough to expand into the New World once Columbus makes his little sail. But anyway, that's about it. Thanks for watching. Next time, I don't know who I'm going to cover. I've got a few campaigns done. I've got a few campaigns that I'm working on. So we'll have to see, but other than that, that's pretty much it. If you enjoy 14th and 15th century history, I do have a podcast called the Timur Podcast. You're probably aware of that by now, but I covered the life, conquest, character, and legacy of Amir Timur, or Tamerlane. There's more information about that in the description below, but I need to stop talking and go to bed. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.